this video we'll be finding the square root of I. This is a really interesting problem, and at first you might think, well, I is the square root of minus 1, so the square root of I is just going to equal minus 1 to the power of a quarter. Now this is correct, but what does this equal exactly? So the way we do this is we're going to let the square root of I equal a complex number, so a plus ib. And now we want to find the values of a and b. So we're going to square both sides. So I equals a plus ib all squared. And this expands out as a squared plus I squared b squared plus 2abi. Now we know that I equals the root of minus 1, so I squared will just equal minus 1. So I equals a squared minus b squared plus 2abi. So now we want to equate the coefficients, so the real ones and the imaginary ones. On the left hand side we don't have any real components, so this means that the real components on the right hand side, a squared minus b squared, have got to equal 0. And also the imaginary components on the right hand side have got to equal 1, because that's the coefficient here. So 2ab equals 1. And now we can solve these. So a squared equals b squared, and let's rearrange for a, so a equals 1 over 2b. So we can set this back in. So 1 over 2b squared equals b squared, which means 1 over 4b squared equals b squared. So if I multiply both sides by b squared, I get b to the power of 4 equals a quarter. So now we want to square root both sides twice, essentially. So the square root of a quarter is a half, and then the square root of a half is just 1 over root 2. And we've got to include the plus or minus sign in here because these are two valid solutions. So now we're going to sub this back into here. You can see that a squared equals b squared, which means a is going to equal b. And because in this equation here they're both positive, that means the sign, the plus or minus sign, stays in the same orientation. So a equals plus or minus 1 over root 2 as well. So now we've got these values of a and b, we can sub it back into our original definition, which means that the square root of I is going to equal plus or minus 1 over root 2 plus I times 1 over root 2. I'm just going to do one more step and rationalize these fractions. So the square root of I equals plus or minus root 2 over 2 plus I times root 2 over 2. And there you go, square root of I.